correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience. Hey folks, welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm Steve.
And I'm Steve.
And it's 2025?
Yeah.
Yes. Our first new episode, well, technically it'll be the second one to release, but it'll be our first episode of the new year. And we're actually recording it for us on New Year's Day.
Right. Wow.
Because we both don't have to work.
Exactly. It's a day off that we could agree on.
Which I'll tie that into our topic for the show in a minute.
Yeah.
But before we do that, let's spotlight another podcast here on the D20 Radio Network. And this week we're going to shout out a podcast called the Genesis Archive, which, well, it's, as you might guess from the title, based primarily around the Genesis engine, and it's an actual play podcast. Now, most of their content has been in their Unseen World setting, which is a really cool, modern, but historic, folklorically based fantasy, I guess is the best way to describe it. But it's set in Vegas, which makes everything better, you know?
Yeah. They have a really cool setting, and I really dig the Genesis Archive.
Well, right, and they're all very good role players. So there's very good story and character development, interplay, and everything going on. Looking at their feed though, because I'm behind on listening to them, they have been for a few months going through apparently some kind of one-off campaigns or whatever. Their most recent episode was actually part of something called the Nameless Host, which is trapped in the ghostly husk of Camelot. The gang struggles to find hope in the face of impossible odds. I don't know what it
Sounds
is.
good. I'll check that
Sounds
out.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a check out.
Yeah,
Especially from those folks over there.
Yeah, they're very, very good. Like I said, very good. They're all kind of creative author, theater, etc. people. So it's very, very entertaining listening.
Yeah, good stuff over there.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, check
and
them out.
Where can you find them?
Genesis Archive. Look, I just called them up on my podcast catcher to check the feed. So I'm assuming that since I can do it, pretty much anyone else can. Be it Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. I use Podcast Addict. We host on Podbean, so I'm sure you can find them there. In fact, I used to listen to them there. So, you'll find them, and I'll throw a link in the show notes. Also, if you're looking for anything else to listen to, go check Podcast tab on D20 Radio Network homepage. A lot of good stuff there. A lot of the shows that are currently listed may not have put out episodes for a while, but there's still a lot of good content to go back and check out.
Yeah, just because somebody hasn't put out an episode in a while doesn't mean it's not good content to go back and listen to.
Oh, exactly. Right? There are times where, look, you and I struggle, right? Sometimes they're what can we do that we haven't done before?
Right. Right. Well, let's get into talking about things we haven't done before, other than, or I should say topics that we haven't done before.
Right. So our topic, if you will call it this week, is more of a prompt. And this came to me, I don't know, half an hour ago. And as I promised, I'll tie it into the intro there, right? So am I the only one whose podcast co-host is never off and available the same time they are?
I don't think that is true. I think that's true for a lot of people, because I'm sure, I can think of two off the top of my head. One person who is incredibly hard to get a hold of, and one person who is in Australia.
Right. But it translates that. Am I the only one whose gaming group is never available at the same time they are?
Oh, yeah.
It's the same thing, right?
Oh, no. I love this idea. Am I the only one? Yeah, I don't know.
And the one that kind of came to mind for me was, I started looking around, and I'm looking at the stacks of books I have here, and let's not even talk about my PDF library. But am I the only one? Like, I see these games on Kickstarter, or I see the description of them, or I get to play them at a con, and I go, "Oh, this is so much fun! I want to get this," and then I get it, and it sits in the stack because I'm going to do this other thing, and when I do that, then I'm going to, and the stack just gets taller and taller.
I, yeah, I have not stopped but slowed my purchasing a lot because of that. So I understand where you're coming from, where it's like, man, why do I keep buying these games and they just keep going on the stack unread? Like I just can't. I get it.
Yeah,
I understand.
I've slowed down a lot on stuff that I buy. Like, I did pick up that Los Kobolds that I mentioned on Game of the Week a couple episodes back because, well, as we talked about then, you find that description and you're like, oh, this is the game I didn't know I needed, but I do.
Yeah,
But
I need
have I
this.
even opened the PDF? No.
No. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Well, that's why I like going to cons, though. I like running games at cons because it gives me an excuse to read the games that I have been going, oh, I'll read this eventually. Oh, I'll read this eventually. Oh, I'll read this eventually. It gives me a reason to read them because I can go, well, I want to run this.
Right.
I can shortlist games that I'm like, my table's not going to like this, but I want to run this. Like, that's
Mhm.
where am I the only one that has a table that doesn't like the same games I do? Like that's a question that I have because like my table's very very hardcore fantasy and they love me running fantasy games. Everybody that listens to this has gotten a pretty good idea that I'm not the most fantasy oriented guy. I last night was New Year's Eve. We were hanging out with some family and I was talking to her uncle and he was telling me about they just started watching Game of Thrones and he was like, "Oh, you love Game of Thrones." And I'm like, "I hate Game of Thrones. Can't stand it. I've never watched that show. I like not never watched it. I watched all of it. I can't stand the show. I hate
Mhm.
fantasy. Not hate fantasy, but I'm not a fantasy person. It doesn't do anything for me as a setting." And he's like, "But you run D&D." I'm like, "Exactly. I can run D&D because I can flavor fantasy how I want to flavor it, right? Like I can make that how I can in my head twist it and tweak it into however I want to see that. Whereas when I'm running it for somebody else and I'm describing these situations and they're like, "This is great. This is awesome." And I'm like, "I absolutely despise this setting." Like,
Well, I wonder, and I'm with you there, right? Because, and think though, like I'll watch something fantasy ish, whatever, and be like, oh, this is like The Witcher,
yeah,
right? Like I watched the first season or two with Cavill,
right.
and I'm like, oh, this is cool, but and I've read part of The Witcher RPG, and look, everyone that listens knows that I'm a fan of Artel Sorian and I'm a fan of that engine. But boy, reading it, that's going to take the right group to play that game because
Oh
that
yeah.
is brutal.
Yeah.
And
I
we
can
talked about Carrion Company last episode. It's in Warhammer Fantasy. Do you have to use
yeah.
that engine? No.
No.
But the Carrion Company campaign and the Warhammer world are so far removed from anything remotely similar to typical D&D fantasy that it's not the same thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's not Warhammer Fantasy is such a different beast entirely that it gives it a nice different flair. And see that's the problem though is that like talking about Game of Thrones, I get it. It's low magic, high fantasy. Like it's low magic. It's relatively gritty like fantasy. I get the appeal. It doesn't do it for me, but I love Morkborg. And you know
Mhm.
why I love Morkborg? Because Morkborg is that, but draped in the guise of a plague.
Fair.
Morkborg is that, but the skies are black and the sun is red. And like, I don't know. I don't know how to put it. I need in my fantasy, it has to have like I love Eberron so much, and that's hardcore fantasy with noir. Like I I have to have that little bit of flavoring and that little bit of extra. I just don't care about your dungeons and your dragons. Like I just don't.
Well, I think though part of it, and having listened to Keith, on be it Manifest Zone or whatever, talk about Eberron and the thoughts behind the creation of the world, I think most of your typical D&D fantasy is, oh, this would be cool, put it here.
Right.
Where Eberron was created where, okay, this would be cool, but if we do this, what does that logically extend to in the world?
Yeah, there was a lot. I think Keith and the way he thinks about RPGs and writing in general is one of those things that I've listened to a decent amount of him talk about his writing process. And I like that he is very much invested in the world and in the world itself and not so much like a granular story in that world. And that's what I like. I'm very much about that of, yeah, that's how I build, that's how I write. I'm the same way. I'm more interested in building a world than I am building a story in that world. That's why I love playing tabletop RPGs, because I can build a world for my players and be like, here's the rules of this universe. Go. Tell me the
Mm-hmm.
story that you want to tell me. Tell me the adventure that you want to get into. Tell me the trouble that you want to do. Do you want to go left or right here? I love setting players loose on stuff like that and just being like,
Well,
tell me what's happening.
okay, and so this is, I'll say we, but you feel free to tell me if I'm overstating your opinion here. But I feel like I know you well enough. Am I the only one that when I'm trying to set up a game, I get an image and a feel in my head,
Hmm.
but it's often very difficult for me to interpret, to communicate that in an understandable manner to the rest of the table.
Okay. So, yes, I agree with you. However, I'm trying some new techniques. One of the things that I did the other night was I sat down and I went through a bunch of images, artwork, and it took me a long time to comb through and make sure nothing was AI, and actual artwork. But I combed through and made basically a tone guide for my new campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So I gathered a bunch of images together that sort of fit within what I had in my head as far as what I wanted to tell as far as the tone of the world. I've also gathered together like my city maps and my like some music that sort of fits into the world and built a tone guide so I can express to my players, this is the feel and tone that I'm going for. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a very easily digestible document rather than me sitting down and writing out a full 3-4 page manifesto of um, like timeline and characters and all of this. I can just send my players and be like, look at these pictures, listen to this music, like this will get you in the headspace for what I'm thinking for this game. If you have any questions, reach out and ask me. And doing that, I sent that to a handful of, well, two of my players already, and the third one I just sent it to, and he's going to look at it later today. Um, they're all on board. They're all getting it. They all understand. They're like, okay, so you're going for a feel like a mix between like 1940, like the roaring 20s and steampunk. Yes, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. That plus like, you know the Eberron feel. I don't need to
Yeah.
describe it to you.
Yeah.
But making that tone document and gathering those images and gathering that artwork and gathering like the ideas together also helps myself keep on track, I've noticed. Because I'm doing some like mild writing, I'm able to reference back to my reference document and be like, okay, does this make sense for this world? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Well,
something I'm trying. I'll let you know if I have success with it, but so far it's been a pretty decent tool.
no, I think I think, it may come down to, I think we both have kind of a pseudo visual creative process
Yep.
where we're we're envisioning things, right? A- And it's hard to, especially considering, at least for me, I am not a visual artist. Like I
Nope.
don't have that skill set. But that's how my brain processes things.
I can barely draw a stick figure. Barely draw
So
a
yeah,
stick
I
figure.
like that idea though of finding some pieces of art, maybe some music, to just send them a I mean, I'm not saying you put it together as a PowerPoint, but
I
that type of
literally,
thing.
yeah. I literally made like just a small folder with some stuff and put it on my Google Drive and was like, here.
No, actually, I may have to try that, even if it's just to help me. Like you were
Yeah,
saying, it
like I said,
helps you.
it's helped me immensely in my like. Now, granted, I'm still in the preliminary phases of everything with this campaign, so we haven't even sat down to make characters yet.
Mm-hmm.
But so far, in the stuff that I've been writing, in the stuff that I've been um, planning out and making notes on, and sort of making story beats around, it's definitely helped out a lot.
Mm-hmm. Cool. No, I'll
So,
definitely have to try that. All right, your turn.
uh, hmm. Am I the only one that prefers longer sessions with breaks in between rather than shorter sessions and no breaks? So I would rather play 2 4-hour sessions in a month than play a 2-hour session every week.
I'll agree with you. I think some of that, and okay, I'll go back to editing our sessions with our weekday evening group that we were playing with before I switched shifts.
Yeah.
It was utterly amazing for me going back, and like you were, I was aware of it when we were doing it, but going back through and cutting up the recordings to get down to the actual gameplay stuff and how little we actually played.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, that's
And
why
that's
I've
a
sort of
prime example.
yeah. I think and plus, and I don't mean this to be rude. I love this hobby. I love this community. I love playing tabletop RPGs. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, but that's a big but. I do tend to get burned out if I'm doing it too frequently.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm doing it, like, I don't mind recording the podcast and sitting down and talking about it, and that's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually playing the game. Sitting down every week to play the game for, let's say, 2 hours is exhausting to me because if I'm playing, it's not so bad. If I'm running a game weekly for like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, it's hard for me to be like excited about a new idea. You know what I mean? I don't have time, I feel, to recoup and get my thoughts together. I'm just bleh, bleh, bleh every
No,
week.
I hear where you're coming from. I see. I think for me, it's a little bit. I like it once I get into that playing space mentally.
Yeah, yeah.
And here's the rub for me. And you know this from having dealt with me. I fully enjoy the bullshitting and tangenting and everything else that goes on, but at the same point, the fact and I participate in it heavily. So but I also get very frustrated when we spend half the time we get together doing that stuff and then only get to play for half the time.
Right,
And
exactly.
I think doing like you said, if you got together twice a month for 4 hours or once a month for 4 hours, you have the same amount roughly of bullshitting and tangenting, but it's sandwiched around a much bigger segment of playing.
Well, yeah, and typically, and I'll say this as well, if I'm blocking out 4 hours on a, let's say, Saturday or something,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not blocking out 4 hours. I'm blocking like six.
Right.
I'm blocking like eight. You know what I mean? I'm going to play games. We're gonna play for probably 4 hours, but I'm gonna go from,
2 to 8.
yeah, whatever it may be, 10 to 6, whatever time I'm going over, we're doing whatever it may be.
Right.
And that gives me more excitement, and I feel like the table chatters less because you don't have that. Like every week we sit down, what did you have, how was your week, how's your day been, what, blah 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 blah. We talk for 45 minutes before we even start. Then, a 2 hour session is now an hour and 15. Hour and 15 of actual playing these games is not, in my opinion, enough time to do anything really.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of times, especially with more combat focused games like D&D, where your an hour and 15 is an entire combat session.
Right.
There were times, and this is where I sort of fell into with my, what I called my episodic game, my weekly game, was that we would sit down, we would be there from, say 5 to 8. The first hour and a half was spent, did you watch this? Did you see that? Did you catch this? Did you see this? Did you see those reels I sent you? Did you catch this out? Did you do that? Just blah, 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 blah. The normal chatter. And I'm not complaining about normal chatter because it's good to have camaraderie with the people that you're playing with. I'm
Right.
not saying that that's a bad thing. What I am saying, though, is that when we would sit down to finally get to the point where we're playing the game, it would either be we're going to have a yap session and we're going to have a session where it's role play heavy. And then next week we're going to pick up and have a combat session because that's what we didn't get to today.
Right.
Whereas if we're playing for 4 hours, I can do combat and social in a session, get it all in, feel like I had a complete session rather than feeling like I broke up this session because we only had an hour and some change to play.
No, I'm yeah, exactly. I think, and I I sincerely doubt we're the only people that struggle with this. And like I said, for me, part of the frustration too is that I know I willingly and eagerly participate in the very thing that annoys me to a point and enjoy it. So it's weird that it bothers me, and yet I'm the one doing it.
Right. Yeah, just a thought. I mean, it was just something that, that's what my brain...
Mm-hmm.
All right, now it's your turn. What do you
All
got?
right. So I'll just say it this way. Am I the only one that struggles to actually sit down and read and work on the thing that you actually want to work on?
Yes. And the only times I have ideas and good ideas that I want to use for my campaigns and actually have the time to look at the stuff or want to look at the stuff is when I'm doing something I don't want to be doing, i.e. work. I'll be sitting at work, talking to somebody, doing my job, and I'll be like, man, that would be a really good time to be looking at Twilight 2000. Like, now would be a really good time for me to read that cyberpunk book I've been waiting to read. And I get it.
Right.
Yeah. And then when you get off, you're like, oh, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to read this stuff. Like,
Yeah, no, well, okay, look, I really want to do something with Slay Industries. I have players that want me to do this. Some of them listen to this podcast.
mhm.
Some of them may be participating in this conversation. um, and yet I always end up, I need to get this done. I need to get that done. There's the other things I want to do as well. And it's this, I think
Vicious
sometimes
cycle.
I get paralyzed by, I want to do this thing and I want it, and I feel bad that, like I guilt trip myself because I'm not doing a thing I want to do, and because I feel bad, then I don't do the other thing I want to do, and so the situation just compounds. And I don't know if this is something where I've got to just like manage my time better, but like I feel like that's a cop out solution to say I just need to manage my time better. You know what I mean? Like it is and it isn't. You know what I mean?
At the same time, and I'll say this, I have like, if I try to force myself to do something, I'm going to hate that thing that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know. I find myself in that same predicament of like, do I schedule time out of my day to make sure that I do this? And I think the answer is probably yes, but I think it's less time than what you're thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think where like my brain would be like, oh, I need to schedule like 2 hours out of my day so I can work on my campaign. No, I need to schedule like 30 minutes out of my day so I can work on my campaign.
Mm-hmm.
That way I think that way I'm not forcing myself to do something that I'm like creative processes can't be forced, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least in my opinion. In my case, my creative writing process, I can't force myself to write something creative. I can do it when I can do it. I can't when I can't, and that's all there is to it. So if I slot 30 minutes out of my day and I go, okay, for these 30 minutes I'm either going to write something or I'm going to read something, Okay, well then I've read for 30 minutes, I've written for 30 minutes. I have more than when I started that 30 minutes. I
Mm-hmm.
should feel grateful and accomplished. You know what I mean? Like I should
Yeah.
feel like I did something productive, be happy with that. Um I've been going through this whole little like self journey recently where I've just been trying to and I think this is true for gaming as well. When we don't game and you're a GM and you don't have a game but you're working on something, be grateful for any little bit of progress that you make on that project.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing that I, I'm doing it for myself now, as I'm just being grateful for whatever I can get done. Like if I wake up in the morning and the only thing I can done is I worked all day and I made dinner. Okay, great. I worked all day and I made dinner.
Mm-hmm.
um but if I worked all day, I made dinner, and I got 30 minutes of progress on my campaign, fantastic. I did 30 minutes of progress on my campaign. And any amount of work that you're putting into something is more work than you would have if you wouldn't put the time into it. Does that make any sense? Like, I say
I
30 minutes, but if it's 10, it's 10. If it's 5, it's 5. If it's you had a thought about your campaign in the middle of the day and you wrote that down in your notes, then you wrote a thing down in your notes for your campaign.
so
You're making progress despite
what I
yourself.
hear you saying, in a sense, here, I think, is, and tell me if I'm wrong, focus on what you did do, not what you didn't do, which is probably
Exactly.
the opposite of what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I I don't mean to critique you. You tend to have that what I didn't do in your mind. Like your cyberpunk campaign, we had a blast with it way back in the day, or at least I did. I can't speak for the rest of the table, but I had a blast. I know other people had fun. But you beat yourself up over that campaign because we didn't do this and we didn't do that. Well, that's fine. It's okay. Because what we did
Right.
do, we had a great time doing.
Well, and look, I've said it a thousand times on this show, maybe not a thousand, but
I know.
one of the things, and I admit I struggle with it, I beat myself up over the what could have been in the game, and I have to consciously remind myself that I'm the only one thinking about what could have been. The players are enjoying what is, and that is their that's what they're seeing on the show. They're not seeing what I was hoping it would go this way and this way and that way because I thought that would be the best, and the players got something that they thought was really cool, and that's where
Exactly.
their whatever of it stopped. And I'm aware that I have that issue, but being aware of it doesn't necessarily make it any less difficult to deal with.
No, I understand, and I'm not trying to call you out in any way. I'm just saying that that's something that, and for myself, I need to work on it too. I can't say that I'm perfect as far as that. I beat myself up about the dumbest stuff all the time. I'm so hard on myself about stuff, it's not even funny. But the fact of the matter is that I am trying, and this is just something I'm putting out into space. Is I'm trying to be grateful for what I have done, and I'm trying to not beat myself about up my trying not to beat myself up about what I haven't done. And that's
Mm.
I'm trying to extend that into my personal life, and I'm trying to extend that into my gaming space, is just trying to live and be grateful for what does get done. So,
I think there's a lot to be said for that. And by the way, just anyone that's listening and wants to come on the Discord and share some things like this,
yeah,
hey, do it,
please.
right? Like it can be good to just get it out there and probably hear that no, you're not the only one.
No, no, you're not. You're not the only one. Trust me. Well,
And if you are, then well, at least we can maybe offer some suggestions. Us, the other people on the Discord. There's a lot of good people there. Um,
ton of good people in our Discord.
you know, right? Like I want it to be a community where we can all, what do you want to say? Talk, converse, bounce ideas, even just say something and hear. Well, so another Discord I'm in a community of. someone posted about something that they were effectively struggling with in their actual life. And
Mhm.
them posting this had nothing to do with what the theme of that Discord is about. But as it turns out, myself, I'm dealing with something not dissimilar to what they're dealing with. And I think it was, in a sense, it was a breath for both of us that, hey, there's someone out there that I know that is dealing with a lot of the same things I am. And just knowing that there is someone else out there dealing with the things that you're dealing with, at least for me, sometimes makes it feel easier, even if the only thing I know is that someone else is doing it.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I may not interact with our Discord a lot, and that's just because I just don't. I don't. I don't want to make any excuses for why, but I don't.
You don't
Um,
get along with Discord. You were talking about that a couple episodes ago.
yeah, it doesn't work for my. It doesn't work for me. I'm working to figure that out and working to make it work for me because it's not a tool that I really want to let go of. Um, but, but I know that if I'm struggling with something and I go to our Discord and I go into main chat and I go or into Chatterbox or into game chat or whatever and ask the people in our Discord and go, "Hey, I don't know how to do this. How do I do this? Or how would you do this?" I'll get a bunch of answers and I'll get suggestions and I'll get suggestions from, you know, people that have tons of experience, people that have no experience. And I appreciate all feedback. And I think being open to feedback is one of those things where finding out you're not alone, finding out that there is somebody to talk to that you can reach out and be like, "Hey, how do I do this? How do you do this? I'm stumped here. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this situation." Ask. Because any
Right.
of us, somebody might have feedback that you weren't expecting to have feedback. And somebody might be able to provide you with useful information that you weren't expecting to be provided that information from.
Mm-hmm.
And, you'll never learn anything from a closed book.
True. So, I don't know. I had another kind of, and it's not really an am I the only one here, but it sort of is. So I'll just say it this way: Am I the only one that? Uh, so it's kind of a two-pronged thing. Am I the only one that undervalues my own experience slash thinks I'm not experienced enough to do X?
No.
And
No,
okay,
because I'm the same way.
and it could be gaming related. It could be not gaming related. And I think most of us, a lot of people in this community, gaming community, we look at people who have been doing things for a long time, or people who are crazy slash stupid enough to make a podcast about it, and go, "Oh, I could never compete with their experience, knowledge, whatever." Bullshit. Okay.
Yeah, I've learned so much stuff from just new players, people that have never touched the game before, or the hobby before, people who are just fresh out of, I just read the book and I had this thought. That's crazy. Yeah, I love that.
Uh,
It
just
just
because
because
the
you don't have experience doesn't mean that you don't have input. You just may not have context.
You might, but I will say too, I have listened to podcasts of people who weren't quote unquote experienced players, and hearing the inexperienced, as to the typical way it's done, whatever, take that these people have on how they play their characters, etc., was so entertaining and so refreshing and so inspiring, because they were just going, like the one that I know I've mentioned it before. It was podcast put out by Alex Thomas, who we had on a long time ago, the Mutants and Masterminds dude.
Right.
It was on his. He's part of a thing called the Untold Stories Project, and they had a podcast out that was someone else that's involved with the project. Their middle school daughter and several of their friends playing. I think it was Pathfinder. but there was this. They get into this encounter, and the one player was like, their character. Well, they didn't want to go over to fight the thing because it was in a swamp, and they didn't want to get their boots all mud. And I heard that, and you know exactly what I'm thinking here, right? How many of us that are quote unquote experienced players are both going, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and also going, oh my God, that's brilliant and entertaining.
Oh yeah. No, I don't want to get my boots dirty is a fantastic excuse for you not to have to go through that swamp. You are correct.
And and if you think of it in the context of a character, that's such a cool moment. You know what I
Oh yeah.
mean? Like it's such a defining moment and a block that you could build on, or just a one-liner that was funny and can be let go. It can be both. And I think some
I
of us just get so hung up on the way we're quote unquote supposed to do it
I
that
had a character. Let me tell you this story because this is a thing that directly happened to me, and I think I've told this story once before, but my one player always likes to remind me of it, and I love this story. I think it's hilarious. So I was running a drop in, drop out game at the game shop when I started this campaign. I had a guy come in. He played a couple sessions with us, and he was really cool. Really young guy. He had never played D&D before. I think he was like 15, 16. Like he wasn't very old.
Mhm.
Um, and they're fighting these underwater monsters because I had set up this fishing. It doesn't matter. The context doesn't matter. Just understand that half of the party is fighting monsters underwater. Half of the party is standing on the shore watching this happen because reasons. The half of the party that's standing on the shore is the young guy and another player who was in a shop when everything started going down and they didn't get the breathe underwater cast on them or whatever. So they're sort of SOL, right?
Mhm.
The young player is standing there carving wooden bowls for the rest of the party for when they beat these sea monsters so that they can have dinner. Like, well, what do you do with characters that aren't involved in a combat? So I check in with him. I'm like, hey, are you good? Are you cool with this combat happening? He's like, yeah, no, my character is literally carving bowls for everybody to have dinner on because they're supposed to come back with these really big fish. All right, that's great. Yeah, you do that. You carve those bowls. As a matter of fact, I'm going to throw you random checks every once in a while just to see how those bowls are going.
Mhm.
Just and I did. I slotted him into rotation just to check back in and see how his wooden carving is going. And it was just a great bit of role playing where he just jumped in and you know yeah, he wasn't involved in the combat, but he wasn't bored and he was being like keeping himself busy and was like, well, my character would be doing this. And it was great character play.
Mhm. So like I think, and like I said, I'll fully, insert myself in the group that too many times I think about what should I do as opposed to be it not what would my character do, but what else could my character do?
See, I very much fall into the what would I do? What would my character do in this situation? That's always the question that I ask. And I find myself sort of reserved sometimes, and I need to stop being that way. I think part of that is because I'm a GM and I'm making sure that everybody else at the table's having fun.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't be making sure that everybody else at the table's having fun, but that doesn't mean that you should damper your fun.
Mhm.
So, but anyways, um, yeah, I always find myself being like, oh, I want to do this, but I'll hold back. I'll hold back. I'll hold back. I'll hold back. Well, that's why I like playing con games because I don't have to hold back at a con game.
Mhm.
Most of the people that I'm playing a game with at a con don't know who I am, or they know who I am and they're expecting some shenanigans out of me. So
Well,
if I can give them shenanigans, I'll do it.
I'll point at the Vashgrim game we played at PGX. I didn't know it. Well, I actually did. I saw your sheet, but
Yeah.
uh, you were playing the infected, but
Yes, I
you jump
was.
right in to get the scanner to check to see if anyone's
Yep.
infected,
Exactly.
which
Exactly.
makes perfect sense because if you control the scanner, no one's going to find you.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I was like, have we started checking for infected yet? Are we doing that? No, and it's yeah. I love that game.
That was a
I lo-
really fun session, and I love too. And I mentioned it at the time at the table, the way that session. And I think this goes to Brian really writing a session that showed off the different facets of the game, that showed off a very grim, brutal side of it, and also the cheeky, stereotypy, whatever. Like it showed a lot of facets of that game as it comes out of his head, all in the context of one cohesive scenario.
yeah. Yeah, that's a really fun game. Yeah.
Another one that's on the pile that I haven't read yet.
I know. Well, do you have any more things that you believe that you are the only one?
Probably, but I
Not
don't know
off the
what they
top of your
are at
head.
the moment.
Fair enough. I think I'm about run out of ideas, so I think
All right.
it's time we transition into game of the week.
Woohoo! Game of the week.
Game of the week.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
All right, I have a game and I have it queued up to send to you here. It is called, oh, hold on 2 milliseconds. Mystery Flesh Pit National Park, the RPG.
I have seen this.
So it was on a Polygon article. It is from a guy who has made an alternate timeline at mysteryfleshpitnationalpark.com. I guess some oil man accidentally drills into a cosmic horror beneath the dusty plains of West Texas. And then over decades, the Permian Basin superorganism goes from a roadside attraction to a national park, and all resources documented through tourism signage, wildlife brochures, safety manuals, and government memos. Um, I love that they took this thing that this guy made as like okay, this is a weird flesh pit national park idea, and they've turned it into a tabletop RPG, and they're also like, oh yeah, by the way, he has all of the resources that you'll need. Like, oh,
Yeah,
by the way, like the wildlife guides and all of the stuff that you would be looking for, yeah, it's here. It's already been made for you. You're good to go. I also like the idea that there is just a mystery flesh pit in the middle of Texas. Like, that's kind of weird and really interesting. What other anomalies exist in this world? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like weird and goofy and fun. Like, the description goes on to talk about playing a park ranger who's filling out incident reports as like people are like, as like the flesh pit is screaming. Like, I don't really understand, but it's definitely on the list of things for me to check out. It's weird and groovy and really well flushed out in a weird way that I like.
Well, right, and I don't see why you couldn't. I mean, this is great for any number of systems.
Yeah,
Specifically Delta Green, Call of Cthulhu,
it's already
etc.
spec'd into Cypher System, so
Okay, you know, but take that concept, right? Yeah, so you can use it for that. For okay, if it's in Cipher, Old Gods of Appalachia
yeah,
would probably dovetail perfectly into this.
yeah.
But you could take this concept and run it into a fantasy thing where,
Oh,
the dwarves accidentally mine down into something, or
you could take this concept and run it into everything. Like, there's
think of the
nothing that
fun you could have with the concept like this, just the surface level concept in a Morkborgish game,
right?
or heavens, Vast Grim, right? It's an asteroid,
Yeah, or take the setting and roll it back a couple hundred years.
right?
Let's go back to the Wild West. What happens when some cowboy just comes across this flesh pit?
Deadlands.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you could fit this into a lot of things, and I just think it's weird and fun, and I'm down. I'm
Yeah,
down.
no, it sounds really cool. All right, so that's yours, right?
That is mine.
All right, so I'm going. This is more of a tool than an actual game,
Nothing wrong with
but
tools.
there's also a whole bunch of little supplements out for this that are like $1 or $2 for various
Oh
like
yeah, I've
skilled
looked at this.
whatevers. It's called the Sandbox Generator, and basically, what I can tell, I mean, the PDF will cost you all of like $12, but it's basically a generation tool for probably. It looks like it's designed for like a hex grid, hex crawl type thing. I don't see why you have to use it directly as hexes, but look, it is be it prompts, tables, you know, all kinds of stuff, right? Like, boy, this to me is the perfect thing to kind of kick you through one of those things you're struggling with when you're building a world or a whatever.
This is that thing that you read for 30 minutes a day to help you get out of your slump. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's like, it looks like there's, stuff for random encounters, villages, houses, features, like, and then there's a couple different bundles that it's in with other stuff from the same creator. Uh, Boy, it just looks like, and while yes, it's intended for kind of OSR, like I don't see why you can't change it slightly and make it whatever it is you need it to be, by changing the name or the skin, right?
There's no
Like,
reason you couldn't. There's no reason. We do it all the time with everything.
right? That's half of what I love about gaming, right? You can take this idea and wedge it into this other thing. So yeah, it's the Sandbox Generator is the name of the main title, and that's probably what I'll link in the show notes. But there are a bunch of, like there is factions expansion, biomes. Looks like it's actually available in several languages. If we've got, look like I see a Polish version, French version. At least I'm thinking Polski is Polish. I don't know.
Probably.
Um,
Probably. Yeah.
you know,
Very cool. Well, with all that being said, links to everything are in the show notes. Very excited for 2025. Very excited to see what it's going to bring. We got big things in store. More cons, more podcasts, hopefully more guests once we can
yeah,
figure out scheduling. And I want to thank everyone for listening and remind you all to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at @andrpgs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.